facilitating today. So as you all know, the HECC is developing its next strategic plan, and we are partnering with them in that process. And the first part of that process we call our Get Clear phase. And so we're conducting interviews, focus groups, and we have a survey out. It's open through this week. I think that Guthrie just put it in the chat. If you haven't done that yet, would also encourage you to complete the survey. There'll be some similarities in the questions, but it helps us to get that quantitative input as well. So we'll pull everything that we learn. We're also doing a review of background documents and sort of a situation assessment part of the process. We'll pull everything that we learn into an insight report to inform the strategic planning process. We'll use data from the survey. We do sometimes use quotes from interviews and focus groups, but they're anonymous and we don't include any attributing information. So just encourage you to be candid and share your perspective today. And to that end, we have 3 agreements that we always ask folks to commit to in our focus groups. The first one is to step up and step back. We've got a small group today, so I'm not worried about being able to hear from everyone. But do just be aware of contributing, but also making space for others to contribute. And especially since it doesn't seem like we'll have any members of the public, do feel free to use the chat as well. And so we can use that as a way to chime in additionally. Allow for different perspectives. So we're not looking for consensus today. We would expect and invite and really welcome different perspectives in the room. So please feel free to differentiate from your fellow leaders here. And be bold. We're going to be asking some big picture, important questions about higher education in Oregon, and we want your bold thinking, and we welcome that in today's conversation. So can everyone commit to those 3 agreements? You can just give me a thumbs up just to show that you're good with that. Thanks so much. So let's do a round of introductions, and I will put our prompt into the chat. And I'll start with myself and then go around to other folks. So again, I'm Sarah Lechner. I'm a principal consultant with Coraggio Group. I've been with the firm for about 7.5 years, and we're a strategy, change, and leadership focused consulting firm. I lead our community prosperity practice area, which focuses on post-secondary education, workforce development, and economic development here in Oregon. And so we do a lot of this work across the state, and just really excited to be here with you all today. We've also done quite a bit of work with the HECC over the years. So my pronouns are she, her, and I am going to ask Denise to go next.
Sure, nice to see you all this morning. My name is Denise Callahan. My pronouns are she, her. I am the Director of Post-Secondary Success, excuse me, with the Ford Family Foundation. And my relationship to HECC, we have partnered in various ways with HECC. We're obviously very interested in policy side of things, advocacy as it relates to post-secondary success in the state, particularly for our rural students, and really focused in particular around student parents transfer and the student supports that help our first-gen students be successful. So we interact a lot with the HECC in terms of just partnership, data, research, and certainly looking at kind of the direction things head with policy and advocacy.
Thank you, Denise. Brent, would you go next?
Sure. It's good to be with all of you this morning. I'm Brent Wilder. I'm the president of the Oregon Alliance of Independent Colleges and Universities. We are a 501c3 nonprofit association representing all of the private independent nonprofit institutions here in Oregon. So we work closely with the other sectors as well as HECC on areas of policy, advocacy issues, higher education in general. I've been with the organization, can't believe it'll be 19 years this this spring. So I've been in higher education my entire career. I worked on the public side prior to that. So it's looking forward to the conversation and being here this morning.
Thank you so much. And Maggie, would you go next?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all. Nagi Naganathan, I serve as president of Oregon Tech. This is my 7th year in Oregon. I had joined higher education as a faculty member in '86. I was in Ohio for 31 years before I came to Oregon. He, him, or my preferred pronouns. Nice to be with you all. Nice to see familiar faces.
Thank you so much. And Melissa.
Hi there. Nice to meet you. I think Denise, you and I may not have met before, but nice to see the rest of you who I've had the opportunity to get to know over time. My name is Melissa Goff. I use she, her pronouns. I formerly served as the governor's education advisor, and one of my roles there was as the liaison from the governor's office to our colleges and universities and to HECC. So had a good opportunity to learn a great deal about the work that's happening with HECC, attended the HECC meetings, et cetera. In October, we had the executive director of teacher standards and practices move on to another adventure, and that left an opening at a difficult time to hire. And so I have stepped in as interim executive director for teacher standards and practices. We certify all of the teachers in the state and work around complaints that may be filed against teachers as well. So one of the jobs that we do in that certification process, though, is we work with all of our educator prep programs, all our EPP colleges and universities, private and public, regarding their programs that they offer to teachers and making sure that they're aligned with the required standards for certification. We work with HECC on that. I think we can do more work with HECC on that, and have really appreciated Executive Director Cannon as a partner as well.
Excellent. Thank you all and welcome. And it looks like we do have someone joining to listen in. We may have others join as this is a public meeting to listen in.
Sarah, just a question.
Yeah.
You said some of those quotes could be used anonymously, but then this is being recorded, right?
That's true. Good point. Yes. So
Okay.
there will be a recording posted. However, we will not, in our report, they will be anonymous. But if someone wanted to, watch the recordings and figure out who said that, they could. But there will also be quotes from interviews and from the survey. Because there's open-ended comments on the survey as well. All right, so our first question is kind of big picture. Starting at the highest level, from your perspective, what impact should the HECC have on Oregon? And just quickly, I'll just say from a tech perspective, helpful if you can stay muted when you're not speaking, and we probably will just use the raise hand function, which is up in your toolbar, even though we're a small group. You can also just raise your hand visually, and I will see you that way as well. So feel free to either chime in verbally, or you're always welcome to use the chat.
I'm happy to start if
Great.
I mean, HECC overall, it should be about championing higher education and advancing prosperity through higher education. I think, sorry, I just saw Melissa's hand go up. Melissa, did I? Okay. So it's really, to me, it's about advancing prosperity for all Oregonians through higher education and championing higher education as a catalyst.
Thank you. And I'll ask for your patience today, just because we normally have someone taking notes as well, but we're down a staff member today. So I'm doing both. So it may just take me a second to go back and forth. Denise.
Sorry, I think I inadvertently jumped in there out of order. I think from my perspective, the purpose of HEC is as Nagi said, to raise up the importance of higher education and to create streamlined pathways that really engage and build awareness for all the students in Oregon about what their opportunities are for education beyond high school, and the connection then into the workforce. I think that championing the student supports and student success and just the importance of what students need to be successful within whichever pathway they choose after high school is a key piece of that, so that they not only are accessing education, but they're actually completing it.
Thank you. Melissa.
I would concur that championing higher education is necessary right now in the state of Oregon. I mean, absolutely essential for us. I also think, however, that there is a policy impact that needs to happen, that HEC will have, could have, should have, and tremendous influence over, and that is addressing the cost of education to individuals coming out of college. And I do think that's part of the difficulty that I'm coming out of high school, and I do think that's part of the difficulty that we are having. I think affordability for higher ed needs to be addressed. And I think as we talk to folks from the Oregon Alliance and we talk to folks from our public universities, I see a real concern with the length of time it is taking our public university students to finish. And I have real concerns about maintaining and expanding the diversity of graduates, of college graduates in our state. And I think HEC needs to play a role in that. I'm sorry, I'm going to say one more thing. I also think that HEC needs to have more oversight around the public Oregon university system than it has. I think the pendulum shifted too far, and I'm concerned about where we sit right now.
Thank you. Yeah, Brent.
I would concur with everything that's been said so far. So again, I do think I'll agree with Nagi. I think we're at a point in time where we really need a champion for higher education. And look, I speak a lot with my colleague in the state of Washington, and they've worked particularly close with the business community, and there's a lot of support, and it seems like it's a really strong partnership from that standpoint. So I think that's something that HEC can play a vital role in, because I know this is probably one of the other questions on when we'll talk about, but really, there's really a question about the value of higher education. With our institutions, the issue of affordability is utmost concern, and finding ways to reduce the costs and create additional pathways and make higher education much more accessible is an issue and a concern that a lot of our presidents are grappling with as well. But I think the one thing, and I've talked to Ben about this, and I think we're always trying to find ways is our sector, even though we're independent nonprofit, we play an integral role in that in the state of Oregon, and just trying to continue to find ways to partner with the other sector, the public sector, 2-year and 4-year, is something that we're interested in doing. Our presidents are interested in doing, and really leaning into it, because I really think in order for the residents in the state of Oregon to be successful, it really takes a full system approach. So that's something that we're very interested in doing, and I think HEC can play a key role in that.
Great. Thank you. And thanks for the chat as well, Denise. And just so folks know, I will be grabbing, things from the chat and including them in the notes.
Can I add something, Sarah?
Please.
Both I had the pleasure of working with Melissa for a bit when she was in that role as education advisor, and I've with respect, having seen two different states, I was, like I said, I was in higher education in Ohio for 31 years. Those were independent universities with a coordinating board similar to HECC. We call them regions in Ohio. I think Dennis used the right term, leadership. Leadership is not just being a police person providing oversight. It is really leading the educational outcomes in the state and how best to mobilize the universities. So one can end up using all of our time in managing the day-to-day business, in trying to control the outcomes, and that will be counterproductive. I would even say there is a risk of that happening. We have done this only for 10 years in Oregon. Uh, Before that, I was in Oklahoma as a graduate student. Every state has its own ethos, but I think how the higher education participates in the larger uh, beneficial outcomes for the state becomes important. So I would emphasize the word leadership that Dennis used in terms of leading the higher education institutions so that they can help create the outcomes we desire of higher education.
Great, thank you. I'm going to move us on to our next question. What do you believe are the most significant challenges in higher education that you expect to see either begin or continue over these next 3 years? So this is a 3-year strategic plan. So we're interested in what are the most pressing challenges in this time frame. And
I'm
I
happy
want to
to.
acknowledge you've spoken to some of them. Yeah. So,
Well, no, I
so
can.
I've heard, but yeah, anything
I
else you'd
think
want to add?
we are at a unique point, particularly after the pandemic, I think. The part of the society has developed hypotheses which may not be practical, that I can learn, I can do my work, everything from my couch, uh, could be counterproductive to the society. I think the significant challenges are there is a lot of public chatter with respect to, uh, is college worth it kind of conversations. It's very easy to see them. On another day, one of our benefactors showed me a Wall Street Journal article about, again, from Peter Thiel giving $100,000 if you don't go to college. You should always read the fine print. It's very easy to see that and say, okay, if I don't go to college, somebody is going to give me 100,000. No, they are saying you have a great idea, you want to start something, we are willing to invest in it. And of course, they have their other aspirations out of it. The second one is the emphasis on student health, and that really has taken. I saw statistics, more than 70% of the student body has some health related issues. I think more than 50% think college may not be worth it. I know these are all broad brushstrokes, nevertheless, the reality. And people thinking with the gig economy, I don't have to really go to college. That is also getting a lot of subscription. I think there is a risk when I think Melissa talked about it early on. Higher education is not just about educating and getting a diploma. It is really about contributing to the outcomes for the state, whether it is workforce development, economic development, prosperity as a whole. So I think if we lose sight of the ultimate outcomes, we can end up fixing problems that yield no more solutions.
Thank you. Yeah, Denise.
Happy to jump in here. I would agree with all of those things. I think I would also add, the concern around the drop in students going on to education beyond high school that we're seeing. As I mentioned earlier, at the foundation, we care very specifically about rural, and the gap between rural college going and urban college going has increased over the last 5 years. Particularly when we're looking at students who are underrepresented and who are high need. Certainly, we're seeing a real problem with men in rural communities going on to college, and that's happening nationally, right? It's starting to be a shift there. So I have a real concern with the the perception, as Nagi mentioned, the perception of higher education, the value, the political conversation around higher education now, and the impact that that's having on what we were already seeing as a decrease in students going on. And of course, I think the cost is just, it's so prohibitive. And when you match that with lack of awareness of pathways and, strong transfer portals and pathways, all of those things really impact our highest needs students the most. They end up going in, they don't know what it costs, they don't know how to navigate the pathway, they take on increasing debt and don't have anything to show for it. And I just think we have a real responsibility to figure that out, because it's just going to keep getting worse.
Yeah, Brent.
I would concur with everything, and also with what Melissa just put in the chat. I think the value is a real concern. I think it's just really undermining the work that's being done. I think the affordability and enrollment. One of the things that we have had some conversations with our institutions on is just how do you is the engagement with the adult learner with some education, no degree, and again, I think we're also in a place in time where just the knowledge is doubling. It's got to be probably faster than a year. So how do we talk about lifelong learning, but how do we continue to engage the learner throughout a lifetime within these institutions as a way to really help our economy grow and help our individuals continue to thrive for an entire lifetime? It's not a terminal process once you've earned the degree, and it's not another degree. But how do you really become a facilitator of that lifelong learning process, and how do you do that with individuals and creating access and pathways and points? So I think that's something that that's a change in culture, and I think the more higher education can do that, I think that value proposition becomes much more strong. So those are just some few thoughts. So.
Thank you. Melissa.
I agree with everybody, and I agree with Denise's comment as well. I think, so I'm stealing a fourth thing, see, because I used the chat and I merged two things, so I'm really adding a fifth. What I would say is our colleges and universities are inheriting students who have not been well trained in our K-12 system around the use of technology in order to advance learning, meaning becoming good purveyors of information, critical thinkers around resources that they are accessing, and an understanding of that rapid and vast expansion of information that Brent was just discussing. So, however, at the same time, they are sitting in this technology divide, which is, I think, the university mentality divide, which does not understand that post-COVID, because of that disruption, the way that learners want to engage in colleges and university, I think, has probably forever changed. I do believe we will continue to have people who want to be in person 4 years on a campus. I also believe that the demand for flexible asynchronous learning will not go away. It is much, much higher than the need is being met. And what we see from my vantage point at TSPC is that 50% of our educators are choosing out-of-state programs to learn, and a vast majority of those are virtual out-of-state programs. And so we are leaving that economy on the ground, and we need to figure out a way to meet that challenge.
Thank you. We'll take one last comment on this one. Denise.
Thank you. I just wanted to add to what Melissa was just saying. about learners and how they want to learn and how we reach them. I think tied to that is the changing demographic about who a college student is, right? As we've seen increases in folks who are over the age of 25, student parents, right? The way that higher education is structured does not serve those individuals. And I think it's really important for us to think about as we see a decrease in the number of students graduating from high school, right? The number of 18-year-olds going on, and the opportunity to bring back adult learners, those who have some education, some credential, or, without credential, or those who are just seeking to come back so that they can skill up to and move up in the workforce, right? Colleges and universities, by and large, are not structured to serve those folks. And I think as we see this demographic shift, that's going to be problematic. So I would just like to add that to the comment about technology and how people want to learn now.
Thank you. So I'm going to put our third question in the chat. What are and it says top 3 things. You don't have to share top 3 things. Together, I'm sure we'll come up with more than that. So just think about what are the most pressing things or most important things that the HECC can do to increase educational attainment for learners in Oregon.
Somebody else wants to go first? I don't know. I'm happy to answer, but anyone else wants to go first on this? If not, I will say, going back to in a way what Melissa said, right? I agree with many things said here, but you can have an incomplete conversation that leads to incorrect conclusions. You can easily talk about cause, and but then who is going to pay for it? There are a lot of people forget what is their respective role in all of this. I think in some ways it leads to this question: what are the HECC can do? First of all, be willing to not just say students want to learn differently, be willing to consider new models in which that education can come about. So it's one thing to recognize what the consumer wants, but if we are not going to accept a different modality, that disconnect will get worse. The second one, I think, the sense of purpose. It is one thing, for example, a person like me is expected to say good things about higher education and the value. And, it may be respectfully received, but it doesn't mean it'll have the impact, right? Whereas someone on the employer side saying, this is what we want, and so is willing to deliver to us, that makes it more impactful. And HECC has to be more intentional connecting with those folks rather than only the legislature and the universities. Ben Cannon and I have had, he's a thoughtful listener. We have had many good conversations. How do you bring the other one to the table so that they are willing to share? You all have worked with many different industries. They have their needs. When there is a very penchant need, then they will come up and disclose what they want. Otherwise, they tend to go about their own business. And also, with respect to the cost, it's almost has become fashionable for us to say higher education is expensive. Then again, we are sending a different message to both the students and families as well as to the other side. Nobody is working on the problem, but simply talking about the problem. Interesting, I was in MIT for a function a few years ago. They talked about how expensive is higher education. You just have to look at the cost of tuition at MIT, right? It's not as though they are going to do away with it. So the top 3 things I would say is for HECC to intentionally connect those folks that are really benefiting from the graduates and their contributions to the table. Second one, really look beyond the usual. For example, in the state of Ohio, where I was fortunate to be part of the Third Frontier program. It was a $2 billion public ballot issue that was promoted around economic development. The industry, the university, community colleges, we were almost required to work together towards certain outcomes that the state desired for the state. And up there, they talked about in terms of jobs. I'm not saying that's the only one, but there was this uniting platform in which everybody had to come together rather than, are you doing your daily roles okay? So I would say those things are important. Get beyond the ordinary, not just managing day-to-day affairs. Start expanding the dimension of higher education, connecting the partners.
Thank you. Yeah, Melissa.
Yeah, I'd like to emphasize Nagi's comments regarding convening. I think that HECC is a strong convener when it convenes. And I think strategically having more regular convenings of the right players at different times could make a tremendous difference. I also as we look at things such as the cost of college, my concern isn't so much. My concern is that our graduates can't afford it. So what are we doing to offset that cost for those graduates? And is that necessarily a role of the university to decrease their costs? I'm not sure that that's possible given the I think all of us, when we look at our costs, it's our salary and benefits that are that it's our people that are costing the money. And so how do we pay attention to that? But the other thing that I think HECC could do, and this slightly aligns with what Nagi was saying as well, we could do a much better job in our agencies in education of working with our universities and colleges to let them help them really understand the industry needs. And I don't mean just like major platform education. We don't need educators in every type of education. We don't. So but when we look at math teachers, we need math teachers. So when we start talking to people in math programs and engineering programs, for example, we at TSPC should be having conversations with those deans around math and engineering aren't the only places that those folks with expertise in those areas could be choosing to go. And I think we as a state could do much better at that, and I think HECC could do much better in that. And I think then that helps industry invest differently and feel more seen and a part of what's happening in the state.
Yeah, Brent.
I would concur 100% with both what Nagi and Melissa have said here. I really think one of the things about our organization and working with our institutions, we've got this unique, a bit, I don't want to say power, but the ability to convene is really powerful, and being able to bring institutional leaders together around topics. And I think HECC can do that at a higher level. I think you completely agree with the whole making connections with business and industry is they are really uniquely positioned to do that and can play a significant role in that. I do listen, I think there's many agencies in this work around but the work is too siloed in my opinion. So if there's a way to bring it together, with the various sectors to really benefit Oregonians, it's powerful. I really think I look at economic development and talent development. They're very siloed, but Nagi, we're both on Oregon Inc., and that you see the opportunity and the connection, but it's housed in different locations. So how do we begin to integrate that? And I think when you do this, I think it'll help improve educational attainment because learners will see that pathway, they'll see the outcome. Employers will be able to see this as HECC as a powerful convener in being able to break down those silos and really improve pathways. And again, I think that ultimately the state wins in the long run because you've been able to convene all of these different groups and demonstrate leadership, bringing these different entities together to find solutions. So
Thank you. Yeah, Denise.
I had a hard time figuring out just three. But, so I will say, I mean, I think you're going to hear themes here, but for me, I'm going back to that comment that I made earlier about HECC taking a leadership stance. And I'd really like to see them take a leadership stance in bringing together the various facets of the higher education space around a shared goal and agenda for student support and student success that eventually, right, that leads into then having a workforce that is strong. So definitely agree with the convening. And in addition to that, like really taking a leadership stance on pushing an agenda and an agreed upon kind of approach to this. And having, some authority in that, I think taking some authority in that, but certainly getting folks to a shared place of like, this is what we as higher education stakeholders want for our state. So I think that would be one. Pathways, absolutely. And I put that with a capital P pathways. So I'm thinking from, K-12 into higher education. I'm thinking about transfer. I'm thinking about it into the workforce. But writ large, I think pathways, and as folks have noted here, there's a big disconnect in those silos, I think are really hurting us as a state. And then the final thing that I would say, and I realize this sounds simple and I know it's not, but incentivizing the acceptance and completion of Oregon students in our colleges and universities. Like, I don't know what that looks like, and I don't know how it would be structured, but I just feel like, as we see the colleges and universities, particularly universities, of course, being pushed to accept out-of-state students so that they can cover that bottom line. And I think about conversations that I've had with university presidents and admissions folks, about rural students and getting out and getting to rural students, right? It's not cost effective. Like they're very open about like, we don't go visit out there. And yet we know that kind of interaction and connection and getting, students who are underrepresented onto campuses for visits, things like that really make a change. So, but at the same time, universities are having to look at, how to balance the frankly disinvestment of the state in higher education, and how you do that, you've got to be creative. But I would just love to see some approach to incentivizing our higher education institutions to really want those Oregon students and to, bring them in and have it be worth it and able to do it.
Sarah, if I can add quickly to it, I agree with what was said. And I think I see that more here. The workforce development in Oregon is much more with HECC. And then the business Oregon is on the other side as a Department of Development. And the interface is not that strong here. And I mean, it doesn't, I'm not saying where it should belong, but that connect, it's more of a disconnect than a connect. And what happens is when you park it only with the Higher Education Commission, you get to measure activity, but not the outcomes as well. Because that person, the consumer is on the other side, not really talking the same thing. I think it has to be much more of an intentional connect between the workforce development and the business development in Oregon that is going to help. And I think that is very important. And also, the whole process the process we have focuses on Oregonians, rightfully so. We are public universities, we should serve Oregonians. But in the process, we are also not attracting talent that's coming into Oregon, and that is going to disadvantage us in the long term. Look at what California did, what Washington does, and we are kind of left. The Oregon higher education is so expensive for out-of-state students, so that they are not coming in unless it is University of Oregon or some such space where the attractive elements are different. It becomes very unattractive for others to come in. There are other states which look at undergraduate education and graduate education differently. So, and also enabling institutions to structure certain elements that is more mission congruent and not doing one size fits all will really go a long way. That's why we all have mission statements, and us being able to pursue those channels more effectively would be very important.
Great. Thank you. I'm aware of our time, so I'm going to move us on to our next question. And we may not be able to hear from each person on each question. So I'll invite a couple of folks to chime in, and then we'll also invite folks to use the chat. So our fourth question, what do you see as the Commission's role in promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion?
I think that goes without saying, but to me, equity in particular, you really use higher education as that element that is a differentiator that helps you offset. A person like me serving in this role today is unthinkable. I'm here because of higher education. So I think not just talk about it as just attributes that are important, but really be more intentional how it creates. I might have mentioned to Melissa before, I'm the last of 9 children in a small town in India. If somebody had said 60 years ago, this is what I would be doing, I said, what did you drink this morning? That just, it is, but over time, I kept hearing from people how higher education is going to be the ticket which it has to be pursued. My father put it in a very succinct way when I was in high school. If you want to eat, go to college. If you want to eat well, become a doctor or an engineer. That was his saying to me. So it was just the focus. I'm not saying higher education by itself, that relevance in terms of what else you have to do along with it is important. But I think it is clearly something that benefits all of us in this call. We have benefited from higher education. But it is so easy to say it is expensive, let's not do it. It's educating the students and families how to engage in those things appropriately.
Thank you.
I'll jump in. For me, it's creating campuses and learning spaces that are safe and create a sense of belonging. And speaking as the mother of a trans child who attended an Oregon university, there is work to be done in our state for students who don't feel comfortable on our campuses for whatever reason. And rural is a really good example too. And those students also need to see themselves in their faculty on their campuses. And the faculty cannot be tokenized and not have colleagues to talk to and build relationship with. And I do believe in talking to Black faculty members in higher ed here in Oregon, one of the concerns that I have is that their peer network is not within their campus. Their peer network has to be from other campuses because there's just not enough diversity on our campuses. So it's not only creating the spaces of belonging, it is also creating the representation within those classrooms and leadership structures. I mean, that's why it's important for Nagi to be in his role, and he sees that himself.
Thank you. Yeah, Denise.
I agree completely with what Melissa just said, and I would add to that I would love to see, rather than, I think, there are some targeted programs, there are one-off kind of things. I feel like colleges and universities work really hard to try and meet the needs, but what happens, right, is it's like, we'll spin up a program over here, we'll spin up a program over there, we've got grant funding over here. I would love to see some creativity, and I don't know how the commission's role specifically plays into this, but some creativity on our part to think about how we create the space from the get-go to meet the needs of our highest needs students, our students who are looking for that sense of belonging, rather than having them be these, colleges and universities having to manage like 15 kind of siloed things. How do we get creative and start to think about how we create campus spaces from the get-go that meet the needs of our students, and then within that can specialize? So I'm not sure if that makes sense, but I just I feel for my college partners and university partners because I know they're trying really hard, and it's just not consistent or funded or structurally built in to serve students in that way.
Thank you.
I agree with everything that I concur with everything we said. Just in particular, what Denise and Melissa were talking about. I think there's an opportunity for HECC to demonstrate leadership and convene groups and help our campuses achieve greater diversity, equity, and inclusion. I know that when you look, especially at, in particular, our institutions just being resource challenged and being able to do that within a network of institutions within the state, and I think HECC could certainly play a leadership role in doing that, and would welcome an opportunity to participate in that. So I think that's another opportunity for the commission.
Thank you. I'm going to put our next question in the chat, which I think we've addressed pretty well, but would invite you to just think if there's anything else you'd want to add. So this is a longer question or kind of frame up, but a recent Oregon Values and Beliefs survey indicated that 72% of Oregonians lean towards a feeling that a technical trade education is often a better pathway to success than a university education, as opposed to 28% who feel that a university education is the best pathway to success. In your view, what do you think is the reason behind this opinion?
Nagi, I think you're on mute.
Sorry. One of the challenges with technical trade education, I shouldn't say technical challenges, one of the appeals of the technical trade education is that you invest a relatively shorter time period, and you can see immediate monetary benefits. And it is very appealing that you don't go through this long path and you don't know what you're going to do. It is much more purposeful. It also depends on what they hear. See, there are countries like Germany who have been successful connecting university education and technical trade education. I'm not saying this because I am with a polytechnic university. There are lots of society needs people from all sectors, whether it is arts or humanities. They all go to do many other things. But I think we have a tendency to kind of, when a son or daughter is pursuing their baccalaureate, they are only looking at the end of that program and the challenges associated with it. They are not looking beyond. My daughter, she went to a business school in a well-recognized university. I said, really, you need to think beyond that. This baccalaureate degree may even get you a good job, but 10 years later in your career, you're going to be in a different place. That's why this experiential part. Now, today she's a doctor, even though she went to a business school. That's because she became an EMT volunteer. That really changed her mind about what she wanted to pursue. I think giving people the opportunity to kind of test what they are passionate about outside of the classroom, doesn't matter what degrees they are pursuing, and thinking about higher education in a different spectrum is going to be important now.
Sorry, I realized I never actually put that send into the chat. Anyone else want to add in? Yeah, Melissa.
Yeah, I was just going to add, we also don't exist in a vacuum of the organized messaging around an arts-based education. And I think that, back to my very first comment, I think we have a PR campaign that HECC needs to be in charge of around. There are our job in Oregon is to prepare everybody, every young person and every older person who wants to pursue an opportunity for that opportunity in the long run. And part of that means that as you are graduating, whether it's high school or your 2-year degree or your 4-year degree, there's not only one door that opens for you, you have multiple doors open for you, and you can choose which one you're going to walk through. And I worry that this highly specific, there's certainly places for our trade universities for people who know that they want to go into that work, and it's so crucial and important. And our best trade universities also are creating apprentices who see that they could have additional opportunities in that industry beyond what they're apprenticing into. And I think that really needs to be our messaging as a state. And I think HECC could lead on some of that PR work.
Thank you.
If I can add one more thing to what Melissa hit on, a very good point here. The terminologies are viewed differently in different countries. You go to Europe and Asia, the words like apprentice, like when I got my undergraduate degree in India, I was an apprentice for 6 months in an industry before I got into a job. Whereas those words are viewed differently in the United States. There is almost a hierarchy between is talking about apprenticeship versus education, higher education. Those are artificial constructs, and I think I can't agree with Melissa more. The PR campaign to really convey the holistic value of what you are doing, doesn't matter which channel you are on today, that's going to be important. Get the people to see the purpose of why they are where they are and what more they can do.
I just concur. I mean, I was on mute, Nagi. You got unmuted before I did. I think in some respects it's all about messaging, and that there are multiple ways to gain experience and learn throughout a lifetime. And how can I think HECC is again uniquely positioned to do that, because we have so many wonderful options and opportunities in the state. There's a real opportunity for messaging that to the greater public.
Thank you. All right, so I'm putting our 6th question in the chat, and we have heard a bit on this earlier, but again, welcome. What else you would add? What policy and advocacy issues do you think the HECC should prioritize?
I would say HECC is already involved in advocating for affordability and access for Oregonians. That's a very important part of their advocacy. But how, to me, the disconnect with the other sectors is the one that is not making it as effective. So, and we have talked about it before, so I don't want to dwell on this. But even in terms of policy and advocacy, you can really talk about a legitimate factor if you do not, for example, poverty. But you can, when you speak about it, you can either breed a mindset of success or you could breed a victim mindset. I think we have to be careful on how we dwell on these things. Instead of saying people just begin to subscribe to the fact I shouldn't be dealing with all of this is different from how do I use higher education to overcome what I am dealing with. And I think that's where policy and advocacy become very important.
Thank you. Denise.
Thank you. So I don't know, this answer is probably less about specific policy and advocacy spaces, because I do think HECC is in the right spaces. I think where I wonder if there isn't opportunity is it feels like we are in a space in the state where everything is legislated, right? I'm thinking about the transfer pathways work, and we've had to legislate major transfer maps. We've had to legislate common course numbering. To me, it goes back to, right, that goes back to the opportunity to convene and try and get people on the same page, right, our institutions on the same page about what it is we want for students in Oregon. So I think what I would love to see is maybe less policy and advocacy that seems to be necessary to push, for us to get anything done in these spaces where folks should be working together. And also what seems to happen is that, there's policy that passes and it's like, great. And then there's some next thing that's over here. So we don't ever follow through, right? We don't ever get finished with the thing that if we do end up legislating it, it seems like we don't end up getting finished with it. And then we add on things that, it's like we're trying to, policy and advocate our way out of places where really it's going to take people coming together, building those relationships, building the pathways, because then we end up with what feels like legislation that is counter or right in working in conflict at the same time. And again, I'm thinking about the major transfer pathways and the common course numbering and how folks are managing to do both of those things when really, one probably needs to happen before the other, but now they are required. So less about specifics, I guess, and more about can we start to get to a place of quality over quantity and really think about, are there other ways that we can use our advocacy stance, and HECC can use its advocacy stance to bring together folks in common space to maybe solve problems without having to put it in policy, I guess is that's my dream.
Dennis, beautifully said. We have over dependency on legislation here. This is where we talked about leadership of HECC. There are lots of things that can happen when you put it in legislative cycles. I mean, it may be sometimes easier to say legislature wanted us to do this. That adds power to the operations, but it also holds you back. It takes finite number of cycles when it goes into the process. You are behind 2-3 years in getting to what you need to be doing. There are lots of things that you can drive as a leader rather than being an implementer because there is a legislation or supporting you there.
I will just concur to the last 2 points. I mean, I think, Denise is familiar with what we're doing. I mean, I take transfer work as an example. I mean, the independent sector is working with the community colleges because it's, our institutions believe it's the right thing to do, but we're not legislated. So we're doing it in a way that's what's serving students well. And when you get leadership on the campuses convening around that and working towards that, everyone buys in. They own it, and it's maybe a little bit harder, but I think it becomes part of the culture and becomes second nature, and it becomes it's just part of the work that you do. The only thing I will add to the advocacy piece, and I think it's come up again, I think, is advocacy outside of the legislature, whether it's within business and industry, other communities. I think the more HECC can advocate for higher education outside of the capital, which is important, but I think I think it would make the advocacy within the legislature much more effective. So.
Thank you. So I'm aware of our time. I have 3 more questions, which I'm going to email each of you. I have your email address from the calendar invite. So I'm going to send those via email. If you feel compelled to respond, I will add anything that you send over to our notes for this session. So apologies, we got a little ambitious with the number of questions, even with a small group, but such a great conversation. Thank you all so much for your insights and input. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Good
Thank
to see
you
you all. Bye-bye.
Good to see everyone.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.